Sunshine himself, Around the Car Guy, here to keep you safe and teach you something about cars you probably didn't know.
That's right. That's right. We're going to talk about, well, last week we talked about brakes in general, so people could understand what brake pads and rotors and stuff are. And I touched briefly on brake fluid, and I call it the silent killer. I want to talk a little bit more about that this week. Brake fluid, I remember when I was younger and growing up, the only concern about brake fluid was, is there some in the car? and I remember one of the first cars that I had, for some reason I had to add brake fluid all the time, and nobody seemed alarmed about that. But now knowing about cars, that probably wasn't a good thing.
It was a normal, check your oil.
Yeah, that red light came on the dash, so you pop the little wire off, take the cap off, fill it up, put it on, you were good to go again.
Yeah. It was going somewhere.
It was. And at that time, when I was 16, 17 years old, I didn't realize that brake fluid is not a consumable. You shouldn't, if you have to add, there's a problem. But again, that was the only concern back then was, is there brake fluid in the vehicle? And that has changed. It actually made the change back in the 80s. Mercedes-Benz was one of the first companies to come out with anti-lock brake systems and recommend a brake fluid service or brake fluid change. And of course now it's evolved into pretty much all manufacturers, and it's kind of amazing the brake fluid intervals that people are unaware of. Most of your European cars, BMW, Audi, Volkswagen, Land Rover, most of them have a service interval of about 24 months. Every 2 years, they recommend that brake fluid be changed.
That often?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And then when you get into the Asian and the domestic vehicles, Ford, Chrysler, GM, Toyota, Honda, they're at 3 years.
I didn't
to change your
that.
brake fluid, and it's something that a lot of people aren't doing, and then of course we see the fallout. One thing that we do, and I know a lot of shops do. There's a couple different methods, foolproof methods, where you can test brake fluid. And one is a refractometer, which is the device that checks for moisture in the brake fluid. And then the other are strips that you dip in the brake fluid and you compare it to a chart. We use the strip method at my shop because what it's looking for is dissolved copper in the system.
Is that what is eating up the brake fluid or destroying the brake fluid?
Well, no, the brake fluid's destroying the soft metals, the soft copper in the brake system. So if we start seeing dissolved copper in the fluid, then we know that there's an acid going on inside there, and we need to get it out of there so it don't damage expensive components.
Okay.
One of the properties with brake fluid is it's what they call hygroscopic. Mr. Science.
So it attracts water? Or
exactly. It's like a sponge. Its job is to absorb moisture, and in doing that, it creates acid and other issues inside of there. But why it's become important to change it is just as important as changing it. And
this
what
looks
I
like
brought
something the guy on my dorm floor had.
Is that because parts have become bigger and more heavy duty, or because the brake fluid isn't as strong as it used to be back in the day?
Brake fluid, brake fluid's actually as good, if not better, than it used to be, but it's because we've added components to the brake system. We used to just have basic, you pushed on the brake pedal, it pushed fluid through, caused brake pads to apply, and it stopped. And then we came out with anti-lock brakes and traction control. And so what we've done is we've added components like this guy here to the brake system. This is actually an electric motor. So there's a pump that creates pressure. And then all these different ports here and stuff are different valves. And there's actually a separate computer that connects to this. So when you apply your brakes, that computer tells these different valves to open and close and to pulse fluid in so your wheels don't lock up and your car doesn't skid.
Okay.
The problem is now we've created more moving parts inside the brake system, and we've got tiny passages. There's passages inside here that are the thickness of a pencil lead. And so it doesn't take much debris or corrosion to start to plug up and cause little springs and valves and stuff inside this unit to fail. And when that does, then it turns the anti-lock brake light on. The brakes may or may not work. You could have a pedal that drops to the floor. You could run into a situation where you're just trying to stop normally and the anti-lock brakes are kicking in. I don't know if you've ever heard on your vehicles with the anti-lock brakes, you apply the brakes in the wintertime when it's slippery out and you hear that buzzing, clicking.
It goes,
Yeah.
What's it do? Yeah, it makes that noise. That's this guy here
this
doing
here?
that.
Okay.
Yep, this assembly. And this component here, this is about $1,200
really?
when it fails. And you're probably going to have another $200 or $300 in labor to replace it and flush the system out. And as you can see, Lou, what's that say, that sticker on there?
Remanufactured.
Yeah,
This is a used one.
This is a rebuilt one that's $1,200.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's cars out there where the whole assembly is $3,000 or $4,000.
Wow.
And most often, the reason that these fail is because of contaminated fluid. Very
Eats it up from the inside?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we replace one of these where the fluid's fine and it's something else, a motor's burned out or something. It's almost always because of contaminated fluid, and yet so many people you don't talk
What
about
are
it.
the intervals for changing your brake fluid? Because to be totally honest with you,
You've probably never done
I've
it.
never ever done
I was
it.
gonna say, you're
think I
thinking
have
about it.
either.
It's like I've had my vehicle probably 4 years now, and I don't remember ever changing
Exactly.
brake fluid. So is that one of those like we need to make an appointment right now and just get it
Well-
checked, or we need to be freaking out because
Well,
we're destroying our brakes?
Don't freak
I'm
out.
freaking out right now.
I
Okay,
can tell.
Don't freak out. Most European cars, the interval's 2 years, 24 months. And most domestic and Asian cars, it's 3 years, 36 months. But the reason they put that interval in is they're guessing that that's when the brake fluid could fail.
Right.
And they're assuming, and when they come up with those intervals, they're assuming that places don't have a way to test brake fluid, or they don't test brake fluid. So, I mean, we test it every time we change oil on a car. I've had vehicles where we've changed the brake fluid, and people have gone on an extended vacation, with maybe like a pickup pulling a trailer or something, and they've gone up through the mountains or maybe up to Pikes Peak or something like that, where you're really getting the fluid hot and stuff, and it'll come in less than a year later and it tests bad because it was overworked. It was worked really hard.
Used up, yeah.
Exactly. I've got a friend that owns a shop out in the Denver area, and brake fluid, if you've got somebody that commutes or has to go up into the mountains often for work or something like that, they're changing their brake fluid much more often. So, the 3 years and the 2 year interval, that's a good guess. I mean, that's a safety net. It's just like they tell you to change your oil every 3,000 or 5,000 miles. Well, if you go 6,000 or 7,000, your engine's not going to blow up. But they tell you 3 or 5 because they don't want you to wait till 6 or 7.
Right.
The brake fluid's kind of the same situation. My recommendation is just have it tested. That's the best way to know. If your car is 4 or 5 years old, you've never done it, it's probably a good idea.
But if you've come in and had an oil change, you guys would have said,
I
hey.
can speak for Westside Auto
Right.
Pros. Yeah, we definitely would have tested it.
Yeah, I've never
And if
heard
there's an
anybody
issue-
even testing ours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you guys tested it and you're like, hey, you need to change your brake fluid. What would something like that run?
It runs about $90.
Okay.
Far
And you
cheaper.
You suck all the bad stuff out and put new stuff in.
Yeah, actually, we've got a machine. We went the next step. We've got a machine that actually hooks up to the brake system and hooks up to all 4 wheels of the car, and it actually pulls the old fluid through and puts new fluid in and makes sure it's all flushed out and stuff.
There you go.
So
All right. Well, if people want to have
to
their
think about.
vehicle checked out, they want to stop by your place, how do they do so?
they can come to Westside Auto Pros. We're at westsideautopros.com, conveniently located in Clive, Iowa.
Beautiful Clyde.
And if you're not sure about your brake fluid, just stop in and talk to Joe, Sean, or Heather. I mean, we can run out and test it real quick for
Just
you.
like a little, like you're testing a fish tank.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's a little test strip. We'll be happy to do that for you.
All right. Perfect. Sounds good. Great as always, buddy.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.